Hello, on this video I'm going to talk about the switch in C++. To create the basic syntax of the switch, I can type or I can use the code snippet. So I'm going to use the code snippet. So I start typing the word switch, and then right here on the IntelliSense the word switch comes up. So I'm going to put the arrow down on my keyboard, and then I'm going to press enter. And Visual Studio creates for me the basic syntax of a switch statement. It's just missing the case right here. I'm gonna write the case pretty soon. So the first thing I see is the switch on, and this is a variable or a value that I'm gonna switch on for the switch. So for this example, I'm gonna create the variable int x, and I'm gonna give a value of 2. So right here on the switch, I want to switch on x. In other words, I want to get the value of x, and I want to switch on the value of x. And then inside the switch statement, I'm going to start running my case. So case 1, do something. And then after that, I'm going to have a break. Then I'm going to do the same thing with case 2. And then case 3. Alright, so because the value is 2, I know that I'm gonna fall under case 2, and then instead of doing something here, I'm just going to display the value 2. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the case 1 and the case 3. Alright, so this is complete now. And if I run this program, I'm gonna display 2 right here. And it displays 2 because the x is 2. And then when it comes to the body of the switch, it has a case where it's 2, and therefore executes this part here. If my switch on value were 1, it would display 1, and the same thing with 3, it would display 3. So when I have the value 3 right here on the x, that means this x here gets replaced by 3. And then the switch will look for the case that's 3. So you will ignore the case 1, ignore the case 2, and will execute the case 3. And then once execute the case 3, once it sees this break right here, it gets out of the switch statement and it stops executing the switch statement. So if I had here a case 1, for example, the x here would be value of 1. Then the switch statement would fall right here on the case 1. And then executes everything that's inside here. Then once it sees the break, it will not go to case 2. It will get out of the switch. So the switch is fast because when it comes to picking up the case, it doesn't waste time looking for anything. Once you found something that where the case matches what you're switching on, executes and it's done. So let's take a look on the break now. The break is not necessary, but not using the break may have some bad results here. So I'm gonna delete the break right here for the case 1, and let's see what happens. I'm gonna run the program, and then he executed the case 1, which is 1. And then he also executed the case 2, which is right here. However, you're switching on the number 1 only. You are not switching on number 2. So that happens because I'm missing the break statement right here. And when I'm missing the break statement, it just falls to the next case until it finds a break. So once it found this break right here, then it stopped executing the whole switch. So what happens if I delete this break as well? If I do that, then it prints the 1, 2, and 3 because it found the case 1 here, it printed 1, then it did not find any break, so it printed on 2, did not find any break again, it came here, display 3, then finally it found a break and it stopped executing the switch. So you need this break here. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is the default. The default value is whenever there is nothing in your case that matches what you're switching on. Let's say if I have 100 right here, then because there's no 100 in any of the cases, it will execute only the default value. So I'm gonna put the break back here, and I'm gonna put the break here as well. So if I put 100, I do not have any value that matches the 100, and then the default gets executed. But the default is also optional. If I don't have the default here, I can run this program and nothing happens. So the default is optional, but it's also good to have. So I'm gonna put the default back here. And now this switch statement looks really, really good. Now, the advantage of the switch statement is that it's very, very, very fast. This is extremely fast because if I'm switching on number 3, for example, then the number 3 gets replaced right here. And because it's a switch statement, it does not need to test any case. It does not need to test case 1 or 2. It goes straight to case 3. So even if I have 20 or 30 or 1,000 cases right here that don't match what I'm looking for, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the speed of the switch. The switch, it goes straight to the case where it matches what you're switching on. So switch is very, very fast. However, switch has limitations. A couple of limitations are right here that's mentioned to talk about. One is it cannot do range. It can only do exact value. If, for example, I was using the if statement, then I could use if x is, let's say, bigger than 0 and x is smaller than 1,000. So on this if statement, I would pick up here any value of x that's between 0 and 1,000 would get captured on this if statement, because if statements can do range of values. Now, if I want to do the same thing here on the switch statement, I cannot do that because the case is a single value, not a range of value. So if I want to force this switch statement to be of a range, then I would have to write a lot of values right here to be of a range. So in this case here, x can be anything between 0 and 3, and that's going to be inclusive. And then I'm going to get it within range. So here all I'm doing is within 1 and 3, and it's within range. So if I want 3, I run this program and I get within range. Or if I put 1, I also get within range. So if I want it to be between 1 and 1,000 here, I would have to write 1,000 cases right here in order for this to make sense. So that's one limitation of the switch. It's very bad on doing ranges of value. It's very good on doing exact value. All right, and the other limitation worth talking about is what can you switch on? So because the switch has this very, very fast speeds, it requires to have integers only. So if I had here, if I want to switch on a string, for example, and if I try to switch on the s, which is a string, and even if I have a value here, Seattle, for example, it would not let me do that. This is a syntax error because it cannot switch on a string. All right, so how about a double? Can you use a double or a float? Can I use a float right here or any floating points? And let's say here I have a 2.2. Can I do that? The answer is no again. So floats and any floating point, floats, double, or any floating point data types from C# from C++ cannot be used here. So these can only be integers and integers only. However, a couple of exceptions here is the char can be used as well. And the reason the char can be used is because char is a integer behind the scenes. So the integer value of a behind the scenes is 65. If you just do a search for the ASCII table, and then you will see that the capital A is 65. So I'm gonna put here the value 65, and then the switch will take the character and then it will compare to 65. So I'm gonna run this. So 65, got it. So the character is stored into a integer. Because of that, it works. Now I can do something similar with a Boolean, and the reason is because the Boolean is also 0 or 1 behind the scenes. So I can also switch on a Boolean because Boolean is 0 and 1 behind the scenes. So if I run this true, true is obviously 1, and there is no 1 here, so it's going to execute the default. And here is the default. Now if I have this as a false, false is 0, and if I have a case here of 0, for example, then you definitely get this case here and execute. All right, so in summary, the switch is a very, very fast control statement. However, it has limitation. And one of the limitations is that you can only use integers to switch on. Remember, Boolean and characters get stored as integers behind the scenes, so you can also use those. And the second limitation is it cannot do ranges. It can only do exact value. Now, you can work around that, but it's just ugly code if you want to force a switch to work within a range of values. All right, so that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.